Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Burbank Police Commission meeting. And we're going to start off our meeting by calling to order. A roll call. Sorry.
Okay, Commissioner Chapman?
Here.
Chair Coombs is absent. Commissioner Elman?
Present.
Commissioner Feruzin?
Here.
Commissioner Hakobian?
Present.
Commissioner Liu is absent, and Commissioner McKenna.
Thank you. And now we're going to move on to the flag salute. Commissioner Chapman, can you lead us in the flag salute? Can you lead us in the flag salute?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. The public comment period will be upcoming in a few minutes. For community members and here in person, please complete the speaker's card and hand it to staff. For members who wish to phone in comments, please call 818-238-3335. Callers will be placed in queue until all in-person comments have been received. And now we're going to move on to commission announcements and reporting out by commissioners and ad hoc subcommittees.
Thank you. Welcome back. Your world travels.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, turn the mic on. The committee that's trying to coordinate with the schools has been in communication, and I'm finding out that the administration is returning August 1st. So we're hoping in July to conduct to compose a very broad general offer that we'll send out to the administrators. And whoever responds, and we'll have whatever success we can with their cooperation, and hopefully down the year it'll snowball. But we have had some activity on it during this last month. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner McKenna. And anybody else?
Just to say that I've been in communication with some folks from Together We Can around various things that they're working on, like a potential community meeting and some other things. So just been trying to support them as I can.
Wonderful. Thank you. Commissioner Ellen? Sorry.
Yeah, I had the opportunity on May 25th to attend as part of the Los Angeles Fleet Week for the U.S. Navy, their leadership conference, which was held in downtown LA and sponsored by the Los Angeles Port Police. And I have to say, it was very interesting because it was at such a high level when we were talking about things that affect the entire country. Yeah, and it's pretty interesting. I thought one of the most interesting speakers there was Vice Admiral Peter Deffinger, who is former Rear Admiral of the U.S. Coast Guard. And his background is he ran the TSA in the Obama administration. And in 2010, when British Petroleum had the oil spill in the Gulf with the Deepwater Horizon, he was the incident commander. And when we talk about crisis management and cooperation, teaming, and, other groups you have to work with, which you normally don't, he was a very interesting speaker, and I really enjoyed the whole experience of that leadership conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ellman. Any other comments? Anything to report? Oh, Layla?
Yeah, I forgot to mention that I also attended a webinar through NACOL around bias in interpretation of video evidence. So it was just a couple different people presented, and they spoke about how where the camera angle is from or whose point of view it's from, and all these different things affect the way that evidence is interpreted. Because I think many times people like to think, well, everything's on video now, so it's very clear what happened, and even still we see that people have different opinions about what happened even with the video. And so it's just kind of going into explaining why that might be, and then also just how the different where the video is taken from. Is it a security camera up somewhere? Is it a body-worn camera? All those different things, how it all plays into how it can be interpreted by people, because we're all human, right? So we see things how we perceive them, right?
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And if there's no further reporting, we'll move on to oral communications, and this will be for 3 minutes. First, we'll start with the public comment period in person. I would like to call up Valerie Kamea. Welcome to the Police Commission meeting.
Thank you for allowing the public to speak at this commission meeting, and good evening. I'm Valerie Kamea. I've been a resident of Burbank for 13 years. I live on Catalina by the airport, and I understand that there are 4 buildings coming up that have Section 8 housing, which is not an issue, but that because of certain law, they're able to not have a parking space for each unit. And I understand that maybe fewer people in Section 8 housing have cars, but if they're trying to help, improve their lot, they might have them. And parking is really tight on Catalina right now, and I just want to raise the possibility that more police presence might be necessary there. I'm also not sure if and I know this is not your bailiwick, but if there's enough recreational space within the buildings, and if Robert Gross Park is going to be a default backyard for everybody. It's it's been fine as backyard right now, but when you have, I don't know, 1,000 people joining, it's is that planned for? So I just want to raise that. And the third thing was, parking, security, and just thank you for keeping us safe during COVID and everything you do. I appreciate it. Pass. Good.
Thank you very much. And now we're going to move on to David Donahue. Welcome to the Police Commission meeting.
Good evening, Commissioners. First, thank you very much for your service. I know it's volunteer and it's a lot of effort. Also, good evening to staff and Chief Albanese. My name is David Donahue. I'm a resident and business owner. To the previous commenters, illustrating the buildings that are going on Empire, I would definitely echo those sentiments that she had. This evening, there are a couple things I wanted to address the Commission on. One, first, is I want to commend the Commission for looking and taking a look at safe streets. So the safe streets, I think that there's also been reports on Vision Zero. I think several months ago a sergeant did a presentation and talked about how Vision Zero would actually cause more injuries and death, and that examples of Vision Zero in the city of Los Angeles have basically showed that it's not accomplishing what it does. So the reports that you're going to hear, that you're going to look into, I would really encourage the Commission to be a very strong advocate to the City Council. They will listen to you. They will listen to public comment, and I try to do that as often as I can, but I only have 3 minutes. You all have a lot longer. You're also going to be able to look at it with a lot more scrutiny to be able to see what the effects are for our community. It is you as the Commission that I think is going to have a lot of weight to that. Also, very interesting thing happened the other day. School's out. My wife and I like a walk around just the neighborhoods, and we have several times been passed by e-bikes on sidewalks, not on Chandler Path, which we live very close to. But the other day, we were almost knocked over by a young man who was probably traveling about 15 miles an hour on the sidewalk. And there was nothing for us to really get out of. We had to we're like, get out of the way, get away. And he just basically gave us the middle finger and said, you get out of my way. I don't know if there's anything that the police department, we did call it in and report it, but it is kind of interesting summertime development. Also, is there a ride-along program for a person who's 87 years old and would like to go for a ride-along with a police officer, not for the whole shift, but a short section, because my father-in-law can't hold it that long, but he would like to be able to experience a little bit more one-on-one with the police department, if that's an option. Thank you again for the service that the police department does. I think it's exceptional, and we're very lucky to be a resident of Burbank, and thank you again to the Commission for your service.
Thank you very much for your comment. And now we're going to move on to Commission responses to public comments. I'm sorry. We're going to move on to public comments through phone call. Do you have any phone calls?
We do not, sir.
Thank you very much. And now we're going to move on to Commissioner's response to public comments. Commissioner McKenna?
Yes, Valerie, in a previous evolution, I was on the Traffic Commission, so I'm very familiar with some of the parking things you're talking about. And I understand that, I believe Laura Friedman proposed that if it's within a half mile of a metro hub or something, that they're required, they do not require parking spaces. I do know the city council has worked hard because they're getting, they're getting orders basically from Sacramento on the amount of housing we have to increase and the parking. But I do think, especially with ADUs, parking is going to be something that's going to be a problem, and it's better to talk about it a little bit ahead of time. Mr. Donahue, I bought an e-bike when I was on the traffic commission. I went to a metro program in North Hollywood. I got on the e-bike. I thought it was phenomenal. I would never think of riding on the bicycle, because you're absolutely correct. My first reaction to it was, when I was a boy, the police took my Honda 50 away from me, my little scooter. This is faster than that. And I don't know, and I do live very close to the Chandler Bike Path, and I have to watch my speed. So I agree with you. I think it's something that technology has gotten ahead of regulations, and I think it's something we need to address. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Hellman?
I'd like to thank Mr. Donahue and the other speaker. Sorry, I can't remember your last name. But thank you for coming and addressing us. I have to agree with you about the e-bikes. I don't own one, and the issue is they are so quiet when they come up behind you. Plus, they're capable, I think, 25 or 28 miles an hour. And I just don't believe that the sidewalk is the place for them. But I think it's a matter that, as a city, we should be looking into. Thank you for coming.
Commissioner Chapman?
Well, I'd like to thank both of our speakers this evening. One thing that Mr. Donahue mentioned about ride-along, and I'm wondering if we could get maybe a comment from our department about the availability of ride-alongs to the public.
So typically the ride-alongs, well, first of all, we took a hiatus during COVID, understandable as far as ride-alongs. So ride-alongs are typically scheduled for our police commissioners, for folks that are interested in law enforcement or in the process. This is the first time in my long career in law enforcement that I've had an individual who's 87 years old that's interested in a ride-along. So I have great admiration for that, so I'm going to try to figure out what I can do. So it may not be a full-blown ride-along, but certainly a tour and maybe a couple laps around the station so that he gets to experience what it's like to be in a police car with the radios, and it does have the cool factor. So we'll coordinate with Mr. Donahue. Captain Cornelius is here, so we will do our best to accommodate that.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Fitzon?
I also had a question for you, Chief Albanese, or anyone else here who I'm sure can answer from the department. Can you just share with everyone what is the current regulations or rules around e-bikes? Are they right now, as of now, are you allowed to ride them on the sidewalk, or is that currently already not allowed?
So in answering your question, it's my understanding, but I'm not the subject matter experts, that they are not for sidewalks. So I am going to look around the room to see if I'm getting. So let me do this. By the time I get to the chief's updates briefing, I will have an answer. Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else have any responses? Thank you, everyone. And I would like to thank the individuals that came in for the public comment period. I really appreciate your time. We all really appreciate your time. And thank you for coming. And now we're going to move on to the approval of minutes from May 17th meeting. And
Make a motion to approve?
wonderful. Commissioner McKenna, motions to approve. And Commissioner Elman, seconds to approve. And then any discussion? All approved? Wonderful. Okay, great. All approves? Everybody approves? And now we're going to move into the items of business. For our first item on the agenda, it's the presentation discussion on the effects of SB 357, the Safer Streets for All Act, enacted into law July 2022, will decriminalize loitering for the purposes of prostitution. And we would like to welcome Lieutenant Claudio Lasacco for a presentation.
Need the PowerPoint, please. Good evening, Commissioners. Thanks for having me again. Lieutenant Claudio Lasacco, oversee the Investigations Division at the Police Department. A couple months ago, the Commission asked for a presentation on SB 357. So like you said, I'm here to have a short presentation on that. So we'll talk about the verbiage of the repealed law of SB, of the Senate bill, the elements of the repealed law, efforts to repeal the Senate bill after it was enacted. I'll give you some stats on both loitering for prostitution and prostitution that entail here in Burbank, the effects of the repeal, and I'll obviously answer any questions you all may have at the end of the presentation. So Governor Newsom signed SB 357 into law in July of 2022, and it became effective essentially immediately. The changes in the law, which are entitled Safer Streets for All Act, decriminalized loitering with the intent to commit or solicit prostitution. So it did not legalize prostitution. It only decriminalized the section that allowed the police to arrest and prosecute loitering with the intent to commit prostitution. It also authorized people who have been previously convicted of the crime, which is in Penal Code 653.22, to petition the court to have that conviction removed or have it dismissed or even have their case sealed. Here is the verbiage of the law, which, like I said, it's exact verbiage of the first paragraph of the law, which again is criminalizing the loitering with the intent to commit prostitution. There's several subsections to the section that I had just posted. They include, in summary, does not apply to minors. To actually have the crime of loitering for prostitution, the subsections entail several examples of what the officer needs to actually see or have seen for the law to have actually been violated, which essentially is hailing down people in cars or from cars, making a scene, stopping and having conversations with the intent to have a prostitution act. Repeatedly stopping, waving your arms, engaging with drivers and passengers, etc. Having been convicted of the section or a prostitution-related section in the past could be used. Circling, so driving around in circles in a specific area, looking for individuals to engage in prostitution and contacting and initiating conversation with them. And the final subsection had essentially a catch-all that would allow, if the officer saw some other type of activity that he felt was related to that act, it could also be taken into consideration. There have been some efforts to repeal the law that repealed the law, if that makes sense. So there's been quite a bit of activity around the state to try to bring back the section that was repealed, if I'm making myself clear. And that effort is up and down the state. This example is from San Diego. It's the DA. Rob Bonta was involved in that, and as well as some legislators up in Northern California. Here are some stats from the city of Burbank only. On the left side of the screen, you will see loitering to commit prostitution, which is the section that was repealed. In the last 3 years, we had exactly 0 arrests. In the years before that, in 2018, 19, and in 20, we had the arrests that you see there for the loitering. Most of those arrests were in and around hotels and motels where there was activity related to prostitution. On the right side, you will see simple prostitution arrests. So that's just your what you know as run-of-the-mill prostitution, 647B of the Penal Code. and those are the number of arrests. The last bar on the right is year-to-date this year, 2023, and then to the left of that, going back to 2018, are the number of arrests for prostitution itself. And like I said, that penal code section is still active. Impacts to the community of Burbank. We really, as a result of the repeal of the section, have not seen much of an impact here in Burbank. Like I said, most of the arrests going back a few years were related to activity around hotels and motels. What I will tell you is that our investigators spend a lot of time outside the city looking for criminals that have committed crimes in Burbank. And when you sit on a surveillance, you see a lot of activity that you normally wouldn't see when you're sitting in a police car that's black and white with red and blue lights on the top. But when you're in a Honda that's silver, just like everyone else is driving around, the activity in other cities is really busy with prostitution type activity that would be covered under 65322. And essentially, it decriminalized that, so the police in those areas cannot do anything to stop what we would call streetwalkers from doing their business until they actually have a violation, which is an agreement to conduct the prostitution. And you can't do that when you're not actively speaking to the individuals that are committing the acts. So, but here in Burbank, as you probably know, driving around the city, we don't have people walking around actively soliciting prostitution on the street for the most part. What it does do here in Burbank, I will tell you, is that it causes us a little bit of difficulty in effectively, proactively dealing with other crimes that we do have. And here's a short list of that. Pimping, human trafficking, assaults, drug sales, gun possession, robberies, and thefts. When our officers are dealing or we're making arrests with or contacts related to prostitution, loitering, we would end up dealing with these other types of crimes that were either just happened, about to happen, or are going to happen. Quite frequently. The human trafficking aspect is, I know, extremely hot button, the last couple years. And all that really is a term that we'll have women generally that are being trafficked in the sex trade. Usually we'll see them coming down from Northern California. They will be here with a person that we call a pimp that is trafficking them for the purposes of prostitution, taking care of the business, and essentially taking all or most of any proceeds that they have gotten for their acts. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about the human trafficking in this context. And some of that can be really severe, and it could bring about some other crimes that aren't as minor as you might expect, as people might suggest, some other crimes that were actually happening that we now kind of lose a tool in our tool bag to be able to deal with. So that's my presentation. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Lieutenant. And we're going to move on to questions or discussions from the commission. Anyone have any questions? Commissioner Faison?
So thank you for the presentation, and all that information is very helpful. I am not an expert on this law, so please let me know if this is wrong. But my understanding is that kind of the idea is around that, unfortunately, many of the people that would be arrested for this are, as you said, kind of victims themselves, right? Whether it's of, being exploited and human trafficking and things like that, right? So an effort to not criminalize them as victims, and or that, that there may be a better way to help somebody out of that situation, versus criminalization. So I guess my question is, and I don't know, I know the answer to this. This new law that repealed the old law, is there any additional funding or guidance or resources, anything like that to address, the victimization of many sex workers, and or resources to help people go down, find a new path, right?
one of the major issues we see with laws that come down from Sacramento is they will enact a law and then tell local municipalities that you need to do A, B, C, D, E, and F, but then provide no funding or direction on how to accomplish those things. In this case, I'm not familiar or privy to any sort of funding or program that was specifically shared with municipalities to, in regard to this law being repealed. What I will tell you is that when we run into people that are being trafficked or being used in this fashion, we deal with them in a manner as which you suggest. So those numbers there where you see the arrests may not indicate some cases where we have a person that we have come in contact with that they are being trafficked, prostituted. Our goal is to get to the individual that is dealing with, that is doing the deed, right? So what the law did, however, was not allow us to do that. So now we can't even get to that part because we don't know who that person is dealing with. We have no avenue to get that information, or it significantly impacts our ability to gain information to get to the person that's actually prostituting the individuals. But if we deal with somebody or come in contact with somebody that's being trafficked, we absolutely do not deal with them as if they are suspects. We deal with them in a fashion in which they can hopefully get some assistance. And as you saw, those numbers for the last few years were low, were essentially zero.
Sure. Yeah. Is there a local or somewhat local kind of nonprofit or anything like that you all sort of partner with on these things and can refer people to, or how do you, yeah?
We have several, we have the victim advocacy card, and all our victims get those cards, and there is a number of resources that, women, unhoused women, or women in this business, or women with children that need help. I mean, it's a laundry list, websites, phone numbers, what have you, so they would all get those information packages.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner McKenna?
I don't want to oversimplify, but essentially this is taking a tool out of your toolbox.
That's correct.
To do greater good.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, so if there's no further questions or comments from the other commissioners, Lieutenant Luxaco, thank you so much for that. I know that I was the one that agendized this item, and when I first saw it, the first thing that came to mind was it wasn't so much I work with Zonta Club Burbank, great organization. They work with domestic violence cases. They work with, they're big advocates for, anti-prostitution. And, a lot of these women are victims of a specific lifestyle. And that's the unfortunate part. But for me, it was more about understanding what does that do for the landscape of, finding out who the perpetrators are that are, taking advantage of these women. So I think that's, definitely, I would feel like that would be at a loss for any department to not be able to have access to that intel. But, I just want to say I really appreciate your presentation, on the subject, and thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you.
And now we're going to move on to our second item of business, discussion and any action, if any, on attendance and participation in the annual NACOL conference, which will be held on November 12th to 16th in Chicago. And what we're going to do is we're going to discuss any commissioners that would be interested in attending this conference. Commissioner McKenna?
I'd be interested in attending. I've attended over 20 hours of their videos, and I think I'd like to be in person where there could actually be a discussion factor.
Sure. Commissioner Sherman?
I've attended NACOL before, so I would like to give any opportunity to people who haven't attended. But based on my attendance before, I just have to say that the meeting that I attended in Detroit, there was a large contingent of people from Chicago, and it got very heated with the group from Chicago because there was a lot of disagreement between the group, how to proceed, and the Chicago Police Department. So you might be going into the snake pit.
Thank you, Commissioner Elman.
How did that compare to your experience?
When I was in Fort Worth, I wouldn't say it was as heated. I mean, it was very educational. I mean, it's not, you're dealing with heavy conversations and you're seeing a lot of interesting content, but you're meeting commissioners all throughout the country and even outside the country that have different roles. So being an advisory body like we are, we're completely different than some of the commissioners I met from Detroit versus New York versus some commissioners I met from Jamaica. A lot of them came from situations where the local police department wasn't doing justice and they had to kind of step in. But I mean, I think it was really great. It was interesting. It was educational. I think it was what I learned from the other commissioners all throughout the country was, I think, really vital. And I met a lot of wonderful people throughout that experience. So I think that would be extremely beneficial for anyone to go.
Thank you.
Wonderful. And so looks like Commissioner McKenna is interested in going. Wonderful. Okay, great. So Sherry, that's it? Oh, Commissioner Chapman.
The city allows a certain number of people to go from our commission. If we haven't used all of those positions, are we allowed to share that with our department members?
So this year's funding, because it's in Chicago and the expense associated with that, and I was just briefed by our police administrator, we really just have funding for one commissioner to go. In the last couple of years, it was virtual, and so we were able to get most of the commissioners involved. So part of the discussion at a staff meeting was for our future budgets to see if we can have funding, to increase the funding, because it's been the same funding for the last handful of years, to accommodate at least 2 police commissioners to go. If it's local, like we've had it in Riverside and some of the local areas, then the funding is not an issue, and we've been able to send staff also. Virtual, we had a handful of staff that participated virtually also. Does that answer your question?
Do our officers in the past, have they regularly attended? You said during COVID, apparently they did online. But was there always just the commissioners?
And staff, typically the command staff, but we've had
Yeah.
officers in the cops bureau, I believe, that have attended in the past.
And that funding is not available anymore?
No, it's just, there's a cap to the funding.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Elman?
One thing I noticed that when I attended, the entire commissions from different cities were there, everybody. I know that's expensive and the costs involved. I would just throw out the idea that maybe possibly we could forego it for maybe a year or 2 so that we could send a larger contingent of people.
Do we have any idea where their future ones are scheduled? Because it's a very good point.
We don't know when they're at, and it's been annual.
Because like I said, if the next one was going to be in Anaheim or something, that would free up the budget, as the chief described.
I don't know. They don't announce them until, at some point like now.
I think they will announce where the next meeting will be at the conference in Chicago.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I have no comments to make on this specific subject. So, wonderful. Okay, so Commissioner McKenna, congratulations.
Thank you.
And so now,
Let's hope it is congratulations.
yeah, no, it's a learning experience. You'll have fun. So we'll move to our third item of business, presentation of proposed data request form to be utilized by the Police Commission when requesting information or data from the Police Department, discussion and potential adoption of procedures or processes for requesting information or data.
Do you have extra copies?
Okay, thank you. So myself and Commissioner Liu and Commissioner Elman, we had been, one of the tasks of the data subcommittee was to come up with a kind of a workflow or, and form for any data requests coming from the commission to the department so that it can be streamlined, make sure we have all the information, make sure we're sending it to the right person, and, we all are on the same page with the requests that we're putting out there and why we're putting them out there. So to that end, we have created this form, which I've printed out, but it is an electronic, fillable PDF that we can email out, assuming we decide to go forward with this. But it is pretty short. I think it comes out to 2 pages printed here, but it's based on a conversation that I had with Captain Kremen, so thank you for that, about what type of information they would need from us to fulfill a data request. And it, kind of pretty much corresponds to the California Public Records Act request form. And so there are, just little sections to fill in for each of those pieces, the date that you're requesting it, the name of the person requesting it, so that would be one of us or several of us, I suppose, your contact information, the purpose for your request, the requested data format, right? So that could be, maybe you just want a PDF, maybe you need it in an Excel file, whatever that may be. And then what type of data is actually needed, right? So are you looking at something where you need to know, for instance, how many calls for service there were by, day of the week? Or do you want to know where there were pedestrian traffic injuries or events happening? Or would you, want to know how much funds were allocated for a specific task or piece of equipment that the department has, things like that. So there's just some examples listed here. Of course, it doesn't cover everything, but it's just to give an idea of what types of things that should be explained in that section. And then, the time frame question is around, are you looking for example, the presentation tonight was really helpful and included the data from the last 5 years. Or are you really looking to see what's just been happening this year? Because maybe it's, related to a particular law that just came into play or something like that. Data level relates to, are you just looking to know, what's the number of parking tickets, the city issued overall last year? Or are you looking to see maybe by, zip code or something like that to see how, something varies by neighborhood of the city? And then lastly, requests for metadata. Sorry, that's a wonky term, but just means like, you'd want to know if say you get a spreadsheet, you'd want to know what each column, of the data represents, or if there are just generally, are there any data limitations to be aware of? For example, I know the department is working on transitioning, to kind of some new systems, maybe that comes into play, or a certain law change, so the way that they collect data around a given issue may have changed, at some point during the data collection, or anything, if there's anything specifically related to COVID, right? The department, of course, had to adapt policies during that time. So again, may impact data that we're requesting if it's, for the last 5 years, for example. So that's the form. And then, of course, you never know. There's a spot to put in some additional information there at the end that may be relevant for your request. So it's pretty simple, but it should cover all the bases of what the department needs to know from us. And I skipped over this, but at the top of the form, there's kind of the process laid out in the 3 steps, and that's something that we had covered in a previous meeting. So it would be individual or subcommittee can create fill out the data request form, and then we would agendize and discuss that data request at a commission meeting. And if we vote to submit that request, then, that individual or subcommittee can go ahead and submit it to Captain Kremens and with a CC to Sherry. And that would be the process. So that was a lot. Give you all a moment to digest, but I'm happy to answer any questions or any thoughts that folks have.
Thank you, Commissioner Faison, for that presentation. Open up the commission for discussion. Commissioner McKenna?
I think this is great. This is very similar to what the email I think we got from Sherry almost immediately when I came on board, saying that everything goes through Sherry instead of just directly to people. My only thing is, and purpose for data, maybe he's saying it a different way, but I was kind of thinking of something in there about why.
Yeah, that's.
So if there was like, just not, I hate to use the word slant, but That way, the response can be steered to the actual person's concern, as opposed to a general response.
Yes, definitely. So it's just kind of explaining what is our end goal with this. You know, for example, I want to see how, you know, year by year, what are the stats on, you know, again, say parking tickets or something, just, you know, because I want to know, you know, what does enforcement look like and how has it changed over the last how many years or
And
things
that's-
like that.
That's
you know?
actually a very valid example
Yeah.
since we just started a new
I know.
program.
It's on my mind.
So, you know, 6 months from now, that would be a
Yes.
great thing to apply, but yes, thank you.
Something like that, exactly.
Thank you, Commissioner McKenna. Commissioner Chapman?
I assume that this is for the purpose, official purpose of the police commission for the information that we get. Okay.
Wonderful. Okay, great.
I guess if that's good, I don't know if you had anything to add as a member of the subcommittee?
No, I think it's really, you did a good job.
Well, you know, with you and Eva together, we pulled it together. So with that, I guess, you know, I think it would make sense if we
Sure, do
kind
we
of
take a vote?
to agree to adopt this and move forward with this
Can
process.
I ask a question?
Yes,
Absolutely.
sorry.
So it's a data request form. It's going to go through Sherry and Captain Cremens. They're going to meet with me, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to figure out how many staff hours this is going to require. So, and then I'm going to look at the other organizational priorities and what comes first. So, some of this data we will have, and we don't have to create new data. But if there's a burden on the organization, I'm going to believe that you're going to give us discretion as far as being able to fulfill that request, because as we've discussed in the past, there was a request that took over 15 hours. So 15 hours of staff time that could have been dedicated to something else, and I'm not sure what the benefit of the outcome was. So I just want to understand purpose, and that there'll be some grace or understanding if it is going to require extraordinary staff time.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, the purpose of having one person, or I guess a subcommittee, but still there'll be kind of one person's contact information is, I think, to facilitate that, hopefully, you know, back and forth communication. If there's clarification or if there's, you know, it needs to be, you know, kind of refined down to really what, you know, the essence is to make it a more, you know, feasible request, or that just, you know, a heads up, this may take us, you know, 6 weeks, you know, you may not get it for 6 weeks because we have a lot going on right now, or anything like that. So,
Okay,
yeah.
understood. No.
Commissioner Elman?
I like forums because it's a paper trail.
Yeah.
And I think what we could consider at the end, a date for completion with number of hours used by the department, so we can kind of police ourselves on, are we asking for too much or too little, and how much we've used already.
I apologize, Chief, but an opportunity for the department to respond and saying, this isn't possible without this much, and is it worth that amount of commitment?
I think that's
Yeah.
part of the ongoing conversation, but when something, if we ask for something, it's finished, I think it'd be nice to see just how much time it did take to give us an answer. It's a way for us to track ourselves.
Commissioner Chapman?
For the point that the chief was making, I'm not sure if you receive a request, it takes time to develop an estimate for the amount of time that it's going to take. But I'm wondering if that wouldn't be a good point to put between maybe item number 2 and number 3, is that we know that before we make a decision on the commission of we're trying to balance the importance of the information versus the time that it's taking the department.
I guess I'm wondering, on the flip side of that, you know, some of the requests may not be agreed upon by the commission, so then we may be asking for a time estimate before we actually approve it, so I don't know if it would result in more estimates, right? Time estimates that don't end up. 'Cause so if I understand what you're saying, it's to talk with the department to get an estimate of the time it would take before we vote on it? Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't know, I wonder if there would be,
I kind of
yeah,
got the
if it would
impression
end up
this
being
was
more.
sort of an individual request, not a request through the commission, because that would be handled differently.
I think we voted not to do that. There
Okay.
are no individual requests, so it's,
All right.
an individual or a subcommittee could initiate this, but then the commission would have to vote
Decide how
to
much
move
time
forward
to
with
vote.
that, and then we would submit it to the department, and they would come back and say yes, no, or yes, if we, make these changes to it, or whatever it is, right? That's my understanding. Is that everyone's understanding?
Yeah, I'm sure that the department, was it through the Freedom of Information Act, get plenty of requests for information, both from citizens and attorneys, whatever. And I wouldn't want to add additional burden if the information is not going to impact much what we do, or impact our perspective of the policies that go on in the department. Yeah, I think it would be worthwhile to, anytime that it's brought to a vote by the commission, is to have an idea if this is like a 30-minute deal, or is this a 2-day deal, work from the department. I think that would be important to know before advancing.
I guess I would put that question back to you, so on the one hand, we may vote to and approve and send you all a request, and then, you would be able to figure out how much time that would take, and then we either make some changes or whatever based on that, which, as he mentioned, I know it does take time to even just kind of go through that, run through that time estimate. Or would you rather get a request before it's been approved by the commission and come up with that time estimate, and there's a chance that we wouldn't even approve it, so then that estimate may not
So,
end up sort of,
just
I don't know.
first blush in all of this is that either an individual subcommittee can proffer a request, but before it is forwarded to us, the entire commission would have to approve it. So I would prefer that it is a approved commission request, and then with an asterisk is that time associated with it. Staff will look at it to see what it is, and it maybe have great value for all of us that we hadn't considered before, where it'll be absolutely worth the time, or we have part of the data in place where it's not going to be too difficult, or it's just going to be too much of a burden. So that would probably be the fourth step, so between the second and third, as far as an evaluation of the request and time associated with, staff time associated with that, and how that looks. Because I think you're also proffering data form, Excel, Word document, memo. That takes time. So once you get the data, and our liaison clearly knows that, it takes a lot of hours, and then it's got to be formatted. There's a review process so that the product that is
Right.
introduced to the commission is professional, because it's also going to be
Right.
introduced to the public.
Right.
So there's time associated with that.
Absolutely.
So nothing takes 15 minutes.
Right.
And nothing takes 45 minutes. It's going to take more time.
Yeah, and I hear you, because this is what I do
Yeah.
for my job, and it's always, we get a lot of requests from other folks in our organization, just make a map of that, or, run some stats on that.
Yeah,
And
it'll only
it's-
take a
it's-
few minutes.
It's a week later
Yeah,
that,
exactly.
so,
I also think-
I hear you.
I think the key word, though, is request. And so if it's something that's feasible and it's manageable, then it happens, and if it's not, we'll be told why. That's all. I think that as long as it's a request, because there's been absolutely no evidence of the police department not being as cooperative as possible. So we're on that, keep it in a positive light.
Wonderful. Thank you, Commissioner McKenna.
And
And-
just to clarify that conversation around the order, the sequencing of this, so it sounds like you would prefer for us to approve the request before we share it with the department and get that kind of feasibility and time
Yes,
estimate.
so
Okay.
that the commission is unified, that this is what they are asking for, and everybody's in the loop. And then an evaluation as far as the staff hours associated with that and how that all looks.
Wonderful, thank you. So, thank you so much, Commissioner Farzan. So what I was wondering is, do we want to write a note that says, like, data request time is determined based on et cetera, just to, because, if it's going to be an official document, do we want to be a little more detailed when it comes to that? Is that
Yeah,
necessary at all?
I don't know, I guess we could explicitly say, the request, is subject to, I think it's kind of implicit,
Yeah.
that it's subject to the department's, capacity and, limitations and that kind of thing, but,
The completed form will never go to the police department until we've approved it to be sent over. And then it goes to the sheriff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
And so, do we want to take a vote on adopting this, the data request sheet?
Sure.
A motion?
It looks like,
I'd maybe like to go back with our discussion a little bit.
Sure.
If that's okay. And maybe this is our representative from the city. How are you, guy? I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
No. Good evening, Commission. Ian Macmillan, Senior Assistant City Attorney. I'm just filling in for Gina O because she's out of the office this week. Nice
Good.
to meet everyone.
Good to see you this evening. In our charter, we have the ability to do research and collect information. However, we don't have any budget, and I'm not sure how much we can incur costs to the city. Is there any limitations there?
The limitations of the budget all would be within the adopted budget. And so, I would definitely yield to the police department's budgetary constraints. I don't know what those are exactly and if this is necessarily a line item, but generally, if we're talking about staffing hours, we're subject to the individual department's priorities. So I'm not aware of any express limitation on the budget for something like this.
Causing.
Because outside of it, this
increase.
seems like a staff resource issue. Beyond that, it could be formatting costs, some of the kind of just administrative task costs that can come with it.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So if there's no further discussion, we can move on to a vote. And can we have a motion?
okay, I make a motion to adopt or approve the Burbank Police Commission data request form.
Commissioner Farzan motions.
I'll second that.
Commissioner McKenna seconds. And take a vote for everyone? Aye? Everyone agrees? Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And now we're going to move over to our fourth item of discussion. Discussion and action, if any, of the Police Commission Annual Self-Review from the calendar dashboard. Chair Coombs, so he can't be here tonight, but I'm going to be reviewing the report that he sent to our liaisons at City Council and copy the police chief on. It's a report as of September 2022, Joint City Council, Police Commission meeting. I'm just reading this off of what Chair Coombs provided. I'm pleased to present to you the second quarterly Commission Chair's report to Council liaisons during the past 4 Police Commission meetings held in February, March, April, and May of 2023. The Commission addressed the following subjects: use of tasers and policy number 309. Special community engagement meeting regarding military equipment report, followed by discussion by commissioners during regular meeting. Pedestrian safety and ad hoc committee. Data and statistics ad hoc committee, subcommittee, homeless count right along, followed by discussion on homeless engagement, review of decision-making process for police commission, pedestrian safety and Vision Zero, Racial Identity Profiling Act RIPA advisory board report, equity in hiring, the school resource officer program AB 742, and the use of K9 units, request for business cards following the newly established procedure for all commissions and boards, the department's peer support and wellness program, the department's recruitment strategic program, the department's annual budget, and attendance of the online NACOL presentation during the use of force practices. I was told to ask if there's anything that I may be missing from what we may have discussed.
Actually, the only thing that I don't think was on there was maybe your response to the conference last year.
Oh,
I
the
think we
report,
should note the
NACOL
fact
report.
that a commission member did attend the conference, and also there's been, as I pointed out, over 20 hours of training that took place online since then that a lot of our commissioners have participated in.
Wonderful, okay. We can go ahead and definitely add to that. Any other items that may be missing?
I don't know if this is exactly part of the calendar, or if it's the agenda. Maybe the inclusion of the Tuesday night out and the police fire day participation.
So attending those events?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Wonderful. We can go and definitely add to that. And anything else that we may be missing? Wonderful. So, so Sherry, just out of curiosity, so since I was asked to read this report, is there any additional actions that we need to take on this, or just the items that just requested to be added to the report?
I believe Commissioner Coombs has already distributed it, so we
Yeah,
can
yes.
put a revision and add these new items so that it's a final report.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, wonderful. Any other discussions based on? No? Okay, great. So let's move on to our fifth item of business, announcements by the police chief. Brief announcements regarding upcoming events or items to note related to the police department.
A couple things to report out on, and then I'll follow up with the answer from Mr. Donahue. So first, I was remiss in not introducing Ian McMillan from the city attorney's office, so I apologize for that, but he's one of our senior assistant city attorneys. So so far, he's doing a fine job. So a couple things to report out. August 1st will be National Night Out. It'll go from 5:30 to 7:30, and as you recall, it'll start at Johnny Carson Park. There'll be other homes that will be hosting. We'll have a list of those moving forward. But what is most notable will be in September. September 26th will be the joint session with City Council. So that will be our September meeting. That will be a joint session where we'll review the OIR report, Office of Independent Review. There is a draft that is being reviewed right now. There's a number of steps during the review process, and ultimately you will be given the final version and hopefully our responses before September 26th. Any questions on OIR and joint session with City Council? So I'm going to do what I hate doing, is reading to folks, but this is so confusing as far as the e-bikes. So whoever brought up the e-bikes and created that, it is a learning curve for me because everybody knows I like to play poker, but I lost a lot of money on this one. I thought they were supposed to be off the sidewalks, but there's 3 classes of e-bikes. There's a class 1, 2, and 3. Did not know that. So you have pedal-assisted, throttle-independent, and then pedal-assisted motor, and that one can go up to 28 miles an hour. So for a class 3, they cannot be on the sidewalk. So the bottom line is that you may ride an electric bike on the sidewalk in California if you could do so with a regular bicycle. So that's the bottom line. There's nothing statewide prohibiting bicycles on the sidewalk. However, a local ordinance could govern or modify that in the region. So hopefully that helps for Mr. Donahue, for the commission. It was a tutorial for me and for the folks that are watching, maybe some insight as far as e-bikes. So the Reader's Digest version, if you have an e-bike that's a class 1 or 2, you can ride it on the sidewalk.
Thank you, Jim. Anyone have any questions?
Who knew?
Wonderful. Thank you so
Commissioner,
much,
would you
Chief.
mind if I just added something to that? So I
absolutely.
joined the city in September 2019. I'm aware that, I believe it was June or July of 2019, council was presented a agenda item from the Transportation Division of CDD, Community Development Department, on potentially allowing e-bikes and e-scooters. They voted to prohibit those devices. For the gentlemen of the public, I just have the item up here. I was trying to look for this whole meeting, couldn't find it because I was searching scooters and bikes. It's under shared use mobility devices. So there's a whole agenda report. It's from June 25th, 2019.
Excuse me, sir, I was on the commission at the time. That was basically a presentation by Metro for the scooters and the e-bikes and things of that nature, which is one of the reasons why the city sent me to a 6-week program to learn how good all these things were. And I remember at the time that the bike path was important, but one of the things that we talked about was, and I believe the company was called Bird, we were talking about scooters that had seats, like in Hollywood, you see in Hollywood. They said they didn't exist, they do. But we were talking about the danger of being on a scooter where the most medical reports that you land on your face. And we're just talking about how dangerous that was. Because those do come down from North Hollywood. I live on the corner of Mariposa and Chandler, and 3 times a week I see them left there, which means they're being used appropriately. They're coming to a job and they're leaving them. But that discussion, if I'm correct, sir, was whether or not we were going to adopt them as a policy in our city.
Correct.
Not whether not what the law was if you personally own one.
Correct. And I think the action was to send it back to the Transportation Committee at some point, and they would decide whether they'd bring it back. To my knowledge, since I've been here, we haven't brought any item back.
Like I said, at the time, though, it was more of a, I may be stating this improperly, but it was like a vendor was approaching the city and asking for our support. And when we looked at it, it was primarily scooters, it wasn't the bikes at the time, and I know that we voted it down.
Commissioner Allen?
Well, it seems as if it's a quandary because you look at somebody riding the bike on the sidewalk, how do you recognize a class 3 from the other classes?
It's motorized.
They're all motorized, every one of them. It's just a matter of the applications and the limitations that are built into it.
To me, my concern is the speed, and the 25 miles an hour. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm a big guy, and mine goes 35 miles an hour on the bike path if I'm not paying attention. If I have my phone in front of me with the speed I'm on, I can easily be going 35. I have to be very careful.
I opened up a can of worms, so I apologize, but just
No,
for
it's
purposes of
okay.
the Brown Act, we're kind of
Yeah.
more into discussion.
Yeah, we
That's what
can
I
have
was just
discussion,
saying.
That's my
yeah.
fault.
I think we can't.
I just want to offer up
This
that I did a
conversation.
quick search on city council. If you want to find the last item that was presented to council, June 25th, 2019, is a staff report, and then you'll see minutes there about any actions that were taken from the council. I'll leave it at that. If any future agenda items, no, it's, I opened a can of worms, so, but that's it.
Thank you so much, Ian. And wonderful. So now we're going to move on to introduction of agenda items for future meetings. Currently pending from previously agenda items, we have the discussion of the RIPA report recommendations. We have the update on AB 2147 Freedom to Walk Act, the Burbank Police Department and the city's 2035 general plan. And we also have our calendar, our annual calendar that we've presented. I know that in our earlier discussions, do we want to, so what we have is, let's see, for the month of June, so we've pretty much fulfilled our entire annual calendar from 2022. So we have nothing for the next year. And do we want to, I think that, do we want to, for the calendar, we would create that at a future commission meeting, is that correct? Have a discussion, correct. So what we can do is, well, first of all, let's just start off with agenda items, see if anyone has any suggestions.
I think we could potentially, I mean, I think there were 2 items or 3 items maybe that you mentioned that we haven't, there was no date attached, right? So, we could discuss, I'm not sure if enough time has passed for the Freedom to Walk Act. I think we were kind of waiting on that for some time to pass before kind of going back to that topic. But as far as the creating sort of a list of topics in the RIPA report to cover, right? So just kind of maybe come up with a list of topics that we want to cover and then sort of put them in some sort of order, and they would be agendized, whenever they end up actually on the agenda. But I think that could be something for July, since we've had that on there for a bit.
Okay, so would you like,
I mean, I guess it's already
It's
been
already on there.
approved, I guess I'm just suggesting we agendize that for July.
For July.
Put a date on it.
okay, great,
If, unless, other folks have.
sure,
Yeah, to sort of prioritize topics and that we want to.
wonderful. And I'm
Discuss.
assuming that we don't need to vote for that, we just agendas it for July, correct? Okay, perfect. Commissioner McKenna?
And with the fact that our joint meeting, I was going to suggest in September that we have a presentation on what was done as school opened, but maybe that'd be something we look at for August would be too early because school will have just opened. So maybe by October, we could request a report both from our subcommittee and from the traffic division on what was done to accommodate the schools that requested help and things. My experience at being a parent dropping off and having a wife that teaches at elementary school is that the first 2 weeks of school are just the most important for establishing patterns the rest of the year. And I think it's a great opportunity to talk about success rate.
Okay.
Okay, we need a motion on that.
Yeah. We need a motion.
Make a motion. I'll make a motion that we, sometime in the October meeting, that we have a report on the school safety subcommittee and how the traffic division handled the first couple weeks of school.
Second from Commissioner Chapman,
Yes.
all in favor? Aye.
Okay, I'm a little confused. So the Traffic Commission, because it's not in your purview.
There
So
isn't a
how is that
traffic
gonna?
commission anymore.
Okay, because you said Traffic Commission.
Oh, I apologize, I was,
The pedestrian safety
pedestrian
subcommittee.
subcommitte.
So they,
subcommittee.
that subcommittee would report out, and also it's a request to the department on that. So I don't know if that's feasible for you all, but we should have stopped there before we voted.
Can we hear the whole motion? Because it got a little fragmented there.
I would just say that made a motion that in the October meeting, we have a accommodation report, culminating report from the school safety committee, that was subcommittee, and any follow-up from the police department traffic division on what was done and how the first 2 weeks of school went.
Fantastic. So all in favor? Aye. You good? I'm sorry, is there a second?
Yeah. second.
Commissioner Chapman? All in favor? Wonderful.
Justin.
Thank you, Commissioner McKenna.
Are you,
Commissioner Chapman?
are we looking for any other agenda items, additions? And I'm wondering if, since the keg got opened, the keg of peace, by the way, if we couldn't discuss the bicycles on sidewalks at some point, because I could see that impacting, the police have limited options when someone is maybe hurt or something on the sidewalk. They can't protect the public. And it might be worth just knowing a little bit more information about it,
So how would you like to state that as a motion?
that we agendize a presentation from our police department and possibly get a little more history from their transportation, so that we could maybe make some suggestions as to,
Local ordinance.
yeah, an ordinance for maybe banning, people are paying taxes for those little white lines on the sides of cars for bicycles to go on, but the bicycles are on the sidewalks. That
Commissioner Allen?
Well, I'm in agreement in that direction. The city spends millions of dollars on engineering and design studies of roads. But if the sidewalks, they're not engineered, there should be some type of regulation or just a study of what happens. I would like to know if we've ever had collisions of pedestrians and bikes, if it is a problem or not.
So I think this is going to be an excellent topic. So perhaps something like this is that a presentation related to bicycle and e-bicycle safety and vehicle codes associated with those bikes. And I think that would be a good starting point for discussion to see what can be added or needed as it relates to e-bikes. And to be perfectly honest, I'm not conversant with e-bikes. It was clear tonight. So if I'm not, there's a lot of other folks that aren't either. And maybe this would be the first step, is providing that educational, informational package.
Yeah, I was just
Thank
going
you.
to say, I think that would be really helpful. And I think as, maybe it makes sense as a next step versus doing it, preparing at the same time for us to potentially either have one person or have a subcommittee do some research, maybe again after that presentation, around other cities maybe that do have ordinances. It sounds like there is no statewide ordinance, so look into what other cities are doing, and if there's any, good examples or examples to stay away from, perhaps. But I
Fantastic.
think that there'll need to be some research on our end before we can get to the kind of discussion or recommendation.
Commissioner McKenna?
And at the risk of overly getting in the weeds, I know there's laws. I mean, if you're driving a golf cart below 15 miles an hour or something, it doesn't need a license plate. I don't know whether the laws have to do with speed or power, but these vehicles do exceed 25 miles an hour and need to be looked upon as a vehicle, not as a recreational toy.
Okay. So do we want to move forward with making a motion, because this is becoming a discussion? Yeah. Do you want to make that motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we add to the agenda a presentation from the department on all levels of bicycles, pedal included, and especially in relationship to to sidewalk use or public walkway use.
Could we change that to all vehicles operating on the sidewalk? I know in my neighborhood, I'm sharing the sidewalk with a motorized unicycle.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Do we have a second? All in favor?
Unanimous.
Can be.
I was, could we just say all motorized vehicles on sidewalks?
For clarity, a bicycle's not a motorized vehicle. And I believe that you also were interested in some data as far as bike safety. So I believe that can be wrapped up. It's going to be a long presentation, but so for the viewer and for the commission, there's kind of a storyboard. It's kind of like you crawled, then you walked, then you ran, as far as the bike to where we are now. So
Like
just.
human-assisted, human-powered?
Okay. I did clarity, because when we staff this out, there's a PowerPoint that's going to be built on this as far as bicycle and other motorized devices, and also some data as it relates to accidents and safety and all of that.
Thank you, Chief. Commissioner Allen?
I have a question for the PD. I don't know if it needs to be agendized, but I read a story that in Atlanta, Georgia, a police canine died from heat asphyxiation, and every backup system on the vehicle failed. I would just like to know how often our vehicles are tested for these backup systems.
You want to state that as a motion?
I believe daily. So our canine folks, it's an alarm. If the vehicle goes off, the air conditioning goes off, it's a, what's it called, dog? There's some really clever name but for a doggy alert. Or what is it? A hot dog? Something like that. And our folks, we have 2 canine units, are pretty attentive to their animals. So I'm somewhat familiar with what occurred in Atlanta. For training, where they're deployed long periods of time, sitting in a car, waiting for deployment, waiting for training. Typically, we are watching our dogs. So I'm gonna
I was just
let
gonna add in a
Adam
little.
Cornelius answer the question because I'm kind of babbling now.
And I was just going to back that up. So the systems are function checked daily when the officers they're looking for the green lights to be on. Also, when the car is unattended, they have an alarm that is on their person that if things shut down, I'm shooting from the hip, I believe it's called the hot dog system, which is a play on words, but it will sound an audible alarm from the vehicle with the horn, but it also sends them a notice to their person that, hey, your car has shut down, you need to go check on the dog.
And there's a temperature also.
Yes, yeah, if the internal temperature reaches a certain level, it gives them a notice. So that they're, if they're away from the vehicle, which happens, the vehicle will be parked somewhere and they're inside taking care of something. If the vehicle shuts down, they'll get the notice.
Thank you so much for the information.
Any other future agenda items from our commissioners? Thank you, everyone. What I would like to agendize for our August meeting is, since we've already fulfilled our annual calendar and we have nothing for the rest of next year going into 2024, agendize this for the month of August. I believe that we're going to have a new slate of commissioners to discuss topics that we can discuss for the rest of next year. Anyone? I'll make that motion. Anyone second?
You want to agendize putting things on the agenda?
Yeah, and then
I'll
the
second
annual
that.
report for next.
Making the plan.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Thank you.
All in favor? Or any discussion? All in favor? Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. And if there's no other agenda items for future meetings, I will adjourn this meeting. Our next meeting date will be on July 19, 2023, 6 p.m. in the City Council chambers, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.